let's talk about your feelings. That was a silly way to start. But look, if you're here, I'm willing to bet that you have a difficulty feeling safe in your body when it comes to your emotions. This is normal. This happened to me. I still sometimes feel this. But what I would like to offer you today is perhaps an explanation for why getting to your emotions is difficult for you. Why, when you do express your emotions, it maybe comes out like a overwhelming and uncontrollable force. And then also offering at the end a short meditation to help you center yourself and perhaps allow those tensions to dissolve. Now, emotions is going to be what the main topic of this conversation will be. However, you will find that most often I'm going to be referring to negative emotions, to crying, to just associations that are not always positive. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't apply them to positive experiences. Like, for example, you can feel unsafe expressing positive emotions and negative emotions. Especially when those positive emotions are not necessarily socially acceptable. However, most of the time I feel that people have the most difficulty expressing negative emotions, and I think that after healing your relationship with negative emotions, you'll be able to heal your relationship with positive ones too, and the expression of joy and happiness will come easier to you as a result. Now, in the meditation, feel free to skim over it before you actually participate. If it's not something that you feel ready for or even called to do, you don't have to. But my attempt to give you a guided meditation will be something that is, it's supposed to soften your heart. It's supposed to soften the relationship that you have to your body and to the tension that exists in your body, because let's face it, it is tension. It is a negative association with something that feels unsafe. It can feel unsafe to access negative emotions, and that's totally okay, totally fine. So I have some notes with me, and I have some things that I would like to touch on, so that we can kind of get a very broad grasp of this emotion feeling experience that is human. So I'm a big fan of crying. I'm a big fan of promoting people to cry. I think that emotion is a feeling that must be processed. It's something that must be mentally processed and physically released. And for me, crying, yelling, joy, like all of those things are inherently releasing properties. They are releasing experiences where you have something stored within you and you are removing it or processing it, letting it flow out of you. Now, that release is not always intuitive. It's not always intuitive to someone who has experienced a lot of emotional repression, either by the hands of their parents or primary caregivers, their family, or the society that they grew up in. And that flow, that resistance, that safety, those feelings come from the initial experience that shows you, or initial experiences that show you, that accessing your emotions in front of certain people at certain times or at all is not appropriate. It's not safe. And what do I mean by not safe? Not safe means you are either in a physical, emotional, or mental state of threat to your person, to your psyche, to whatever it is, where the response given by a primary caregiver, by society, is that causes you to shut down, or that causes you to suppress the emotions that you're having, that causes you to feel unsafe. And I know that there's a lot of discourse about what safety really means. I personally have gone through like trainings about what constitutes discomfort versus safety or lack of safety. And I understand that it can be difficult to process an emotion causing you to be unsafe. But what I really mean is any behavior that shows you that you cannot be authentic, and authenticity comes with emotion. I will talk about the psychological like concept of lack of safety more in another video, especially when it comes to like your parents and then how that affects you in the future. But for this conversation specifically, lack of safety is correlating to the lack or suppression of feelings, okay? So when you feel unsafe, when you feel that your emotions, you've learned that your emotions will not be heard, will not be accepted, will not be appreciated, will not be processed with you by an external caregiver, you adopt that within yourself. When your emotions are put to the side, when your feelings, whether good or bad, are put to the side or told to, be pushed away, you learn to do those things for yourself. You learn that, okay, mom doesn't like it when I cry, so I'm gonna cry less, or I'm not gonna cry at all. Or when I do cry, it feels like it's out of place, like I'm crying when I get frustrated, or I'm crying when I'm angry, or I'm crying, right? So, or even when I'm happy, so it is the causing of, what that does is causing emotional dysregulation. It's causing emotional upheaval at the times when it's not necessarily appropriate or necessary. The way that my therapist described this to me, especially in regards to the overwhelming experience, is that we often have an emotional bucket, and our emotional bucket can get added to for years, for decades, for months, whatever it is. And when we get to that point where our bucket is so full that it's going to tip over, that's what it gets to. So it's like you're silent, and then all of a sudden you have a freak out, or you break down, or whatever. And that is what causes that extreme emotional, like overwhelming experience that almost actually like compounds the feeling of my emotions are not safe when I express them, because I don't even feel safe in my body when I do express them, because they're so overwhelming that it feels hard to process. And oh my God, what an awful thing to experience. Like straight up, like I've been there. It's terrible, because it's teaching me that, one, I can't express my emotions to the people that I need to express them the most to, because they're not going to accept me or resolve them for me. And when I do, I can't even do that for myself, because I don't know how. And you may not realize consciously that you don't know how, and you may not realize consciously that blow-ups are inherently emotionally like dysregulated, but that's what not processing your emotions does to you. It makes it so that when you actually feel the feelings, because it's not like they go away, it becomes a blow-up. Now, something that a lot of spiritual people talk about is that emotions means energy in motion. And I don't actually know if the etymological like origin of emotion is energy and motion. However, when you think about your feelings as something that is more of a flow than something that is stuck, or something that is like transient in your body, when you think about energy welling up inside of you, and then you suppressing it because you have no desire or no ability to release them, then that's how that emotion gets stuck. And that's kind of also going back to the analogy of the bucket, where your emotions are building. They are and their energy, their feelings, that are begging to be released, but when that release doesn't happen, it's sort of like it gets stored for a later time. And when enough is stored up and all of them have to come out at once, no wonder it's an overwhelming experience that feels hard to control, feels hard to navigate, feels almost impossible, right? And that safety from another person, from your caregiver, that you really wish and assume to be the thing that is going to heal that for you, when that's not available to you, you will learn to put them off forever. And you will learn to, every time that you have too many emotions, you will learn that your response is one that is overwhelming, one that is uncontrollable, one that is angry, that is overwhelmingly sad, that leads you to depression. Like, all of these things, like, they're connected, but they're also resolvable. They're also fixable almost. And I'm not saying that, you know, you need to be fixed. However, wouldn't it be nice to have the experience of like normal emotional regulation? Wouldn't it be nice to feel your feelings and then let them pass? I know it helped me, but really my point is that your feelings, whether you know it or not, have to be expressed. And if they aren't expressed, then you will continue to repeat these cycles of emotional dysregulation in the form of welling up, and then exploding. And I know that that doesn't feel good. So let's talk about how to release it. Now, before we talk about that, I kind of want to dip into defense mechanisms and common ways that people do feel their feelings or explain them. And now, defense mechanisms, I kind of want to use this with a grain of salt, because defense mechanisms, the key thing to know about them is that you developed defense mechanisms to keep yourself safe. Like, you're not a bad person for having defense mechanisms. It's not embarrassing, it's not cringe, it's not bad to find ways to keep yourself safe and then continue to use them regardless of if they're maladaptive or not, okay? So when we're talking about defense mechanisms, intellectualization is considered a defense mechanism. And now intellectualization is the process of explaining your feelings instead of actually feeling them. And I'm very good at that because it's very intuitive to be, instead of feeling your feelings, finding ways to process them mentally without realizing that it doesn't actually do anything physically. Now, intellectualization is not inherently bad, and intellectualization is something that most people do, and it can be good in certain contexts. It can be good sometimes, or even sparingly. But when it becomes a problem is when intellectualization is the only thing that you can do for your feelings. When intellectualization, when explaining what happened to you, when explaining why other people did the things that they did, feels more safe than actually residing within your body and processing and flowing and then releasing your emotions. It can feel safer, it can feel better, like even just it can feel good to know that there is a reason for why this happened to you. And that logic sometimes saves us from the sensation of going through, well, yes, this happened to me, but also this happened to me. This is so catastrophic in its feeling, and I'm protecting myself by talking about it. And of course, you're not consciously doing this, but that's why it feels better. That's why it's easier to talk about the things that happened to you, not how they made you feel, but even laughing it off, like being like, oh, this horrible thing happened to me, you know, like dark humor, stuff like that. And I'm not like discrediting dark humor. Dark humor can have its place. I mean, I don't personally agree with it, but just consider how much that humor, how much it might be a defense mechanism, how much it might be intellectualizing your feelings instead of actually feeling them. And two, how much actually feeling them will liberate you from the feeling that you need to like laugh about it in order to gain empathy from other people, or diminish, really, to like dismiss your feelings about something that happened to you via humor. Now, humor is a coping mechanism. I don't want to get super far into this because I could make a whole video about dark humor, but my point is that feeling your feelings is a terrifying thing. And feeling your feelings and addressing and approaching the fact that the only time that you're willing to give yourself the grace to feel is in those overwhelming, like, too much water, too many drops, bucket overflowing, like, the limit of the bottle that you've been bottling up. It is terrifying. It is, I mean, it might be like worse than terrifying. It's harrowing. It's awful because it feels bad. It feels in your body like your body doesn't have enough space for this emotion. And the whole point of emotional regulation, the whole point of this video really, is that you can get to the point where you feel your feelings and you release them and you flow with them regularly enough that you don't even have to ever get to the point of overwhelm with the feelings, of overwhelm in the body. Your crying sessions, your anger, your joy, they become manageable. They become something that you are bigger than, and that's why you can let them flow, and that's why you can let them go as well. I've gotten off the point of defense mechanisms, but the whole thing with defense mechanisms is that they are there to protect you, and while they may not be inherently like bad, they are not necessarily regulated ways of feeling your feelings, okay? I want to touch on another defense mechanism just because this is something that I experienced, and I didn't even realize that it was a defense mechanism. So when I was younger and I was going to therapy, when I would talk about my feelings, and I want to, this feels poignant because this is why I care. So this is just, I'm going on a tangent. So when I was in therapy, I never cried, and I wanted to, like, I would feel the feelings come up. My therapist and I would talk about the feelings coming up, and I later in life am now able to identify what was happening in those moments where I was just choking them down, right? However, my therapist cried in the things that I was telling her, and that, to me, it shows you just how strong defense mechanisms can be. But it also shows you, or it showed me, that this is why I care. This is why I care about you. Because just because you're not able to access your feelings, just because you're not able to cry, to scream, whatever, it doesn't mean that there are other people that don't care about you. It doesn't mean that everybody else is also apathetic to the things that happen to you. And it also doesn't mean that the things that happen to you aren't atrocious, okay? So this is why I care. I know that that was kind of not really clear, but my point is that you can get there too. Because just like she was able to get there, I'm able to get there. And she probably has had experiences in her childhood that were similar to mine, and that's why she empathized with me. You see what I mean? So like, that's why I care. That's why I'm telling you that I love you, and I'm telling you that I care about you, and I'm telling you how to do these things, because I believe that you can do them too. I believe that you have experienced the things that I'm talking about, and I believe that you can get to the place where I'm at. Okay, so the thing that I used to do in therapy when I was getting emotional and when I was feeling these feelings come up is, it's so silly, and this is why I said embarrassing and cringe. Like, they're really not, because what I would do is I would share this legitimately terrifying, awful, traumatic experience with my therapist, and then I would go like this, and then I would go, like, here's this terrible, awful thing that happened to me, but it's fine though, or whatever. And yes, this is a kind of a silly thing to do, right? I mean, in retrospect, I can see how much pain I was experiencing and why it felt easier to throw up a little peace sign when talking about these things, because what it does is it minimizes the impact of the thing for the other person and for me. And that was my whole thing, is that, one, I don't really want to be like offloading these things that happen to me to other people, but also it is so hard for me to even address that these things happen to me, that I was experiencing trauma at a young age, that I was experiencing awful things, that I was experiencing everything that I was experiencing, right? And it took a load off of me to deliver it in a way that was really mimicking what happened to me, mimicking the dismissal that I felt at the hands of my parents, mimicking the downplaying of my experiences that got me through the experiences, you know? So the defense mechanism of minimizing your pain, of downplaying what actually happened to you, of fearing the reaction in the other person, that's just so heartbreaking to me now. It hits so close to home because it's just sad that I had such a hard time sharing these things that happened to me to someone. I mean, I know she was paid to not judge me, but she got into the profession to not judge me. She wasn't, she got to the space of me and showed me that the things that I was doing while coping at their the very base, or very in the very simplest term, it's coping, right? But it's awful, it's just scary to get to those places. And I've kind of lost what I was gonna say, because it's just so, like, it's sad, and I get it. I'm sorry, I have no point with that. I'll just leave that there. I think that was good. I'll leave that there. So we've actually talked about everything on my list, and I share anecdotally because I find that when you know that somebody else is experiencing the same things that you're experiencing, it makes it easier to address that you're actually experiencing them too. And I don't want to tell you that your experience has to be exactly like mine, because I'm sure it's not. However, the main thing that across the board that we all need help with is accessing this emotional side, is accessing the place that I just went to, the empathy that I could experience through myself, through somebody else, through you, and what makes the emotions so important to process. Now, if all of the things that I haven't said to you already are not convincing enough that the emotions that you need to experience are important, You should ask yourself, how much do I actually let myself feel? How much do I actually feel, period? But how much am I giving to myself by removing the element of emotion? Is it anything at all? Is it really that important for me to keep in my ways, to not express? Or is that a defense mechanism that I have learned through, childhood to bring to now, to where when I have to get into those places, I cannot? To when you notice around you what's missing, what you don't have, and how much of those things that you don't have are your own doing. When it's impossible to access these sides with my child, when it's impossible for me to get to the place of regulating for myself, for my friends, for my family, for my children, for my partner, like, how much is that serving me? And how much is that, failing me? How much is that hurting me? It's not a fun thing to address just how many emotions you have bottled up and put aside, because you're not putting them aside for you. You're putting them aside for someone else, because you learned through someone else that your emotions are not acceptable, are not important, are not whatever, you learned that, and you have now picked that up, and you are now propagating that through your life. And that's not your fault, because, you don't choose the circumstances that you grew up in. But at a certain point, you do have to ask yourself just how much you're willing to continue to let that govern your life, and just how much you're missing out on by condemning yourself to numbness. I know it's not a really popular thing to say, but I sincerely believe that depression begets depression. If you don't learn anything else, if you don't push yourself to something else, and it doesn't have to be huge. I mean, if you don't do if you're I would like to work out, or I would the endorphins from working out over, and you don't do one push-up, you don't do one push-up, right? And that I'm all for empathy, and I'm all for giving yourself grace and space and time. But the emotions bit, it's it's so integral to the human experience. And oftentimes what you really need is the compassion to give yourself the space to cry, to scream, to be happy, to whatever it is. To give yourself the space and the compassion to face the many fears that you have within you, to face the many emotions that you have within you. And I know that it's not easy. I know that it's not intuitive. I know that it seems insurmountable, but the only person that's keeping you in those spaces is you. And the only person capable of removing yourself from those spaces is also you. So ask yourself, how much of my childhood was me not able, or was me being taught to not feel my feelings, to not express my feelings, to keep my feelings bottled up, to keep them within? And how much of the emotional consequences that I experience as an adult, whether that be through blow-ups or emotional overwhelm, how much of that is in relation to the childhood repression? How much of that is getting in the way of me connecting with the people around me, of me connecting with myself? How much of that is my responsibility to simply feel? And the silly thing about like feeling your feelings is it's really not that hard. It's all mental. It's all this like mental cloud that you've built for yourself that keeps you away. The fog keeps you from seeing the truth of your situation, which is that your situation is one to be emotionally resonant with, which is that your situation is important enough to feel. That you went through, and I'm being so for real right now, it doesn't matter if you were traumatized or not, that your emotions are valid and that you deserve to feel them. Like it's just that. However, the realization that has to happen before you get there, or while you get there, is the hard thing. The realization, the mental obstacle, the mental challenge of permitting the emotions to come through. Because what I'm saying with this whole like body, like emotions get stuck situation is that when you have so many things, like when you have so much happen to you that it quite literally rewires your brain, or is like writing your brain, as I've said in another video, you don't realize that the things that you've taught yourself and the things that you've been taught are flawed. And you don't realize that by participating in those flawed reasonings, emotion, feeling, whatever, that you perpetuate that. That's exactly what your parents did. So like your parents taught you can't feel your feelings. Their parents taught them you can't feel your feelings. Their parents taught them you can't feel. You see what I mean? And you, as the person now watching this video, capable of feeling no matter how old you are or young, you are capable of sitting with your feelings, of sitting with the fact that you have repressed your feelings, of sitting with the fact that you can do it, that there's space for you to be peaceful, that there is space for you to feel your feelings, that there is enough emotion within you, there's enough compassion in the world to hear you, that then finally you can get to the place that your parents couldn't get to for you, that you can finally heal that part of you that quite simply is begging to be healed. I know that it feels easier to remain unfeeling. I know that it feels easier to deny, to explain, to dismiss, to wash away, to avoid. I know that it feels easier to do those things. And I also know that it is hurting you. I also know that you have those twinges, you have those moments where you know you can, where it feels like it's too much, where it feels like it's impossible to overcome. I know that you have those feelings. And I also know that you can overcome those. I also know that by sitting with yourself, by sitting with your emotions, that you can repair that you can overcome that. And I mean, I'm going to show you how in a few minutes, but oh my God, it's like, it goes against your every like nature, and that's normal, but you have to be willing to try new things if you want to see new things happen in your life. And you have to be willing to be compassionate towards yourself and be compassionate towards other people, because, and I've said this in another, like a different channel, but like, you are not strong for denying yourself the right to feel your emotions. You are not better than someone else for crying less than they do. You are not you're not strong for calling other people weak for feeling their feelings, because let's be honest, like if you were truly strong, you would face your feelings and you would have nothing like bad to say about other people that do. You would have nothing bad to say about yourself for doing so. You would have no reason to, because you would know the emotional strength and the physical strength and the mental strength that it takes to get over the hurdle of childhood trauma, that it takes to get over the hurdle of emotional dysregulation, of maladaptive emotional like processing. You would know that every single fucking person that faces their childhood, that faces themselves, is a million times stronger than somebody who avoids it. And everyone that does used to be somebody that avoided it, or somebody that couldn't before, myself included. That got a little specific. I was kind of thinking about one person. But I just want you to know that you can do it, and you can change and rewrite the way that you think about your emotions. You can change and rewrite what has been shown to you in childhood. And now I'm getting a little tired because I've been yapping. I actually really don't like yapping. I know that we've like socially accepted it, but like let's be honest, it has a negative connotation, and I have just been speaking from the heart. Period. Could it be that you're speaking from the heart and not yapping? I don't know. And now I want to talk about, or get into, our little meditation situation. So let's do that. Oh God. I'm going to drink some water and then we'll get into it. I want you to get comfortable. I want you to go somewhere physically that you feel safe. And if that's nowhere, go to a park and put your feet in the grass. All right. So take a few deep breaths here. Kind of sit with your body. Before we begin, I want to touch a little bit on, so it's actually not starting yet, but now you're just comfortable. Before we begin, I want to talk about emotions in the body and the tension releasing that should occur before you become more emotionally in tune. Now, in a tense world, in a tense body, your emotions feel like they have nowhere to go. And so the whole point with this meditation is for you to release your body, for you to notice the things that come up for you when you feel like you're gonna cry or get angry or whatever. To notice the things that you do when you repress your crying. And to notice that it is possible to release that tension, to release the grip that you have on your throat, on your, crying coming up. So for me, when I think about the past and how it used to feel when I would cry, I would first feel it in my stomach, and I would feel this like, I would just get like an intuitive hit, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna cry right now. And then as it traveled up my stomach to my heart and my chest and my throat, I would start to constrict, and I would start to clench my heart space, to clench my heart, to feel the feeling of dismissal and the repetitive feeling that I would get when I would cry or when I would start to get emotional in the past, and then how it felt when my caregiver would push that down for me. And then I would do it for myself, right? And then in my throat, it would close up. And then sometimes I could feel like a sort of tingling sensation around my face and my eyes. And then I might like swallow, and then it would all just get pushed back down. So that's how it feels for me. Just consider how it might feel for you as we get into this meditation. Let's take a couple more breaths here. In and out. And really soften the edges of your body to the environment around you. To go piece by piece, body part by body part, releasing the tension in your forehead and your eyebrows, relaxing the facial muscles, unlocking the jaw and relaxing the jaw and the mouth, dropping the shoulders, and feeling the breath rise and fall in your chest as you relax your chest. Next, releasing the pressure in the stomach, allowing it to fall and rise naturally, and releasing tension in the hips, uncrossing the legs if necessary, and letting those relax and fall too. And feeling this relaxation all throughout her hands, your arms, your fingers, your elbows. Taking a few deep breaths here to really get yourself to ground within your body, closing your eyes if you feel guided. From here, I want you to consider any feelings that you have in the body, whether that be tension in the chest, a knot in your stomach, feeling any pain, or even any relaxation that you do feel in your body. Noticing the shape of these feelings, noticing any sensations that come through when you do start to notice them, when you pay attention to them. Where do they go? Do they stay? Noticing if you feel safe in this moment or if your mind is racing. Being conscious of these things is what helps you be aware when the things that are emotionally overpowering come up for you. And it's not always as simple as being able to take the time in these moments when emotions are high. However, the more that you connect with your body, the more that it'll feel like something you're capable of doing in these moments of high tension, of high emotion. Now, I want you to think of something recently, if you can, that made you feel high emotion. Doesn't matter what kind of high emotion, just high emotion. And see if you can locate the origin of that feeling in your body. If it's something that made you cry, the origin of what somebody said or what you saw that made you want to cry. Did you? Could you? Did it feel safe to or safe to not? Did you feel guided? And guided just means a pull to do something, whether you did or didn't. But the thought form to do something or the feeling to do something. And notice how doing it or not doing it felt in your body. If you didn't, did it feel like a denial? Did it feel like dismissal? Did it feel frustrating? If you did it feel liberating? Did it feel scary? Just noticing these things. and allowing your body to provide you with information about the experience. Do you feel better knowing that you did? Do you feel better knowing that you didn't? Do you feel like something's missing? Simply allow yourself to notice what your body is trying to tell you. Now I want you to think about a difficult emotion for you to process. Whether that be something that happened to you, or simply times when it feels right to cry and you rejected that for yourself. You said, I don't want to do that. It doesn't feel safe to do that. Now notice the conditions of that safety. Were they truly moments where it was truly, truly unsafe to do so, or was that a pattern from the past that you brought to the present? No judgment. There's nothing to be afraid of or to judge yourself for in these moments. It's simply noticing what did or did not come up for you. Looking back, can you soften to the perspective of your past self? Can you bring in the perspective of your present self? And does it feel safe enough to allow those things to come through now? Does it feel overwhelming to think about what might happen if you let yourself cry in these moments, if you let yourself release that tension to that past experience and allow the feeling to come through in this relaxed state? Take a deep breath here and remind yourself, or let me remind you, that no matter what you do or do not do, you are still valid and you are still worthwhile. You are still perfect in this moment and in all moments. You are still human, and you are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to be yourself. You are allowed to be cringe. You are allowed to be simply human. And simply human is having defense mechanisms. Simply human is crying, is getting angry, is blowing up, is being afraid, is being happy and sad. You are allowed to be all of those things in congruence. You are allowed to be all of these things and more, and you are all of these things and more. Your validity does not rest on what could have been or what is or is not. Your validity is a simple truth and a simple fact of your existence. Whenever you do feel moments of high emotion come up, I want you to remember that simple fact that you can be those things, and you don't have to be them forever, and you don't have to be them at all, but in this moment you are allowed to be. And take that with you. In moments of high emotion, take the feeling of simplicity, simply valid. Take that with you. As we end this meditation, I want you to give yourself the permission to stay in this space for as long as you need, so that you might feel more that may or may not come up for you, or that you may stay in a space that feels validating. and simply let yourself be there. Without expectation or judgment. Without fear. Or if with fear, then with the acceptance that fear is normal. That pain is normal. And that you are allowed to feel however feels the best to you. Just knowing that emotional regulation will come with time, and that you will always know how to cope with the uncertainty that is life. It just may not feel particularly clear at this moment, but it will. As you come out of this meditation, be gentle with yourself and gentle with whatever came up for you in these moments. You are never expected to have everything figured out. Often I think that nobody has everything figured out, and that's okay. What matters the most is that you're willing to take steps towards betterment, that you are willing to be kind to yourself when it feels inexplicably difficult to do so. I'm gonna let this continue to play for another 10 minutes, and all I want you to do is sit in this space of emotional acceptance. Stay as long as you like, or as short as you like. As always, thank you so very much for being here and for listening. I absolutely adore your presence, and I love you so very much. Everything's gonna be okay. Bye-bye.